Welcome on in. This is the RotoWire Fantasy Football Podcast. It is the week between Conference Championship weekend and the Super Bowl, but we got a lot to unpack. We're going to get into the Super Bowl matchup itself, some early thoughts, some early leans. Coaching Carousel has finally come to a stop as all coaching vacancies have been filled, so we'll get into that a little bit. And also, it's Senior Bowl week, so that means it's kind of the official start of draft season as well. So a lot to get to on this episode. Start the show. Welcome on in. This is the RotoWire Fantasy Football Podcast. I'm your host, John McKechnie. That is Mario Puig. Mario, the Super Bowl. It's set. The matchup has been set in stone. We've got the Kansas City Chiefs going back to the Super Bowl. Big New England Patriots, Tom Brady era vibes that are just kind of sinking in all of a sudden. Not that Mahomes is less likable than Tom Brady and all that stuff, but that same level of just sheer dominance within the conference, and that the AFC. If you're to power rank all like the best quarterbacks in the league, so many of them reside in the AFC, and yet it seems to be Mahomes pretty much every year. He's the guy to bet on no matter what, essentially, and it's unbelievable the way that his career has started. So this is his fourth Super Bowl appearance in 6 seasons as the starter. So that's pretty unbelievable. Has a chance to basically be batting 500 for Super Bowl championships after next Sunday. On the other side, we've got the San Francisco 49ers. So the narrative to me, Mario, kind of sets up very similar to last year in terms of how people want to pick this game. Do the Niners have the better team? I would say so. Did the Eagles have the better team than the Chiefs last year? I would say so. But the other side has Patrick Mahomes, and that's a big issue for whoever is facing the Chiefs. So as the week has gone on, the spread is interestingly kind of taken a move towards the 49ers, where it opened at 1 on Sunday night, Monday morning, and it is steadily kind of inflated all the way up to now San Francisco -2. So that might not sound like a massive movement, but percentage-wise and magnitude-wise, I mean, that's not nothing for it to move from 1 point to 2 points. We'll see if that continues to trend in that direction, but as it stands, Mario, what is your lean on this game?
Well, I'd lean the Chiefs, but it's not because I have any specific vision of how that would go. It's just kind of deferring to the Patrick Mahomes variable, which sometimes it doesn't come through. It didn't come through at home against the Raiders on Christmas, but in the playoffs it tends to. And I guess you could look at Mahomes last week against the Ravens and suspect something like he not so much used all the tricks in his bag, but sort of had an all-timer effort even by his own standards, especially the first Kelsey touchdown. That was that kind of play. When it happens, you on the other side pretty much know you're not going to win, or at least it's going to be even more difficult than you thought, which you always suspect it's going to be difficult with Pat Mahomes. So I don't know if Mahomes falling flat in the regular season had anything to do with it just being the regular season. I don't know if it's the whole time, if it had been postseason, they could have flipped some switch and gone to another level. I suppose that's possible, but I don't know. It's probably true that this Chiefs team is not as good as the other ones. And while I do think Brock Purdy is entirely a system player, I think he's, for a lot of teams, I think he would straight up be a backup. But for this team, with, as you more hinted at, the rest of the roster, it's kind of difficult to anticipate what part of that roster would fail Purdy or leave Purdy in a difficult spot. And I do still lean the Chiefs, though, in part because I think the Chiefs' pass defense is very good. I don't know how good their run defense is. This is definitely a moment of truth kind of point for them as far as that goes, because the 49ers are prepared to give McCaffrey as many touches as it takes. It's like
Probably
Shanahan.
more than six carries, you think?
Yeah, I think unless the game gets away from the 49ers, McCaffrey's probably closer to 30. I think Shanahan knows that however much he likes Purdy and values him as a starting quarterback, he knows he needs to hide Purdy from a defense like this. So that's not to say that the 49ers can't throw the ball in this game. It's just that you always have to throw it within the construction of an offensive structure where the run game is the primary concern of the defense. And it's in that situation, this situation where like the defense is primarily concerned with the run game, and the yards after the catch variable, the separation variable for the route runners is insanely high. And those are the circumstances that Purdy has generally played in, and certainly those are the circumstances where he's been most productive. So whether the Chiefs can win might come down somewhat to like how much they can. I don't think they can stop McCaffrey. I don't even know if they can really slow him, honestly. But they're going to need to make Purdy turn over the ball, and I think they're going to need to make him turn the ball over without him throwing it 35 plus times. I think Purdy's going to throw this like 20 or 28 times, something in between there. And the Chiefs either have to find a way to keep McCaffrey contained or like accept that they can't contain McCaffrey and create a couple timely turnovers, at which point Mahomes usually tends to convert into an advantage in the game. So yeah, it's not like I have any idea what's going to happen, but it's difficult for me to pick against Mahomes, especially when he has a defense that's legitimately strong against the pass. And as much as the Chiefs have been kind of dubious against the run, I still wonder if they might be capable of more if they wanted to stop the run more than they do. Like they're content to sort of take shots in the passing game and let you get a couple first downs on the ground to set that up, because what they're banking on is like you do have to throw it eventually, and when you do, they're sitting there on it. And Shanahan, he knows all that. He's thinking about it, I'm sure, but Spagnuolo is battle tested, especially in the playoffs. So yeah, it seems to me like it's of course a dangerous game for both sides, but it's just for me difficult to pick against Mahomes in a setting like this, given that, in my opinion, if the 49ers do need Purdy to carry them, then that's a loss.
Yeah, and I do think that the 49ers defense has shown some semblance of vulnerability
Yeah,
late on in the season. So while you can point to the Ravens like shutting out the Chiefs in the second half last week, I think it's also important to note that the Chiefs were able to march down the field and effectively do whatever they wanted, especially in the first half. And then when they absolutely had to make a play to seal the game late in the fourth quarter, Mahomes made that happen. So I don't think that we're going to see the Chiefs get held to 17 points again. And therefore,
right.
The passing game is going to have to be a bigger factor for the 49ers. And like you said, that is where it could get potentially dangerous. If I'm like kind of thinking out possibilities for betting on this one as far as Super Bowl MVP goes, if I want to bet on a 49er, it would have to be under the expectation that they're going to win, because I think the only guy to win MVP on the losing side was on the Cowboys back in 1970. But right. But regardless, McCaffrey is about 5-1 at most places, whereas Purdy is plus 225 and Mahomes the odds-on favorite right now at plus 125. So just a little bit of profit potential there if you do think that the Chiefs are going to win. But if the Chiefs win, it's almost certainly going to be Mahomes winning MVP, short of Kelsey having a couple of touchdowns. That
I mean,
sort of
someone
thing.
like Snead or even McDuffie, I don't know. Like, if there's a turnover, if Purdy has a 3 interception game, any of the guys who intercept a pass, especially if it's like at a point in the game where it's memorable, like a tide turning kind of moment, like they've given out awards on the basis of plays like that and stuff. But yeah, if you're talking kind of the actual reason why the Chiefs would win, it would be Mahomes, and with the 49ers, it would be McCaffrey. Although if I were betting, on the 49ers side, I would put money on Purdy because if the 49ers win, there's going to be so much like political pressure to give him the award, if only because of just how much just headlines and counter headlines it'll generate, because it's also no one wants to give it to a running. Even Mahomes shouldn't have won that one MVP. It should have been Damian Williams. So it's in this political climate, there's always going to be pressure to act like running backs are useless, and that no matter how much they're just clearly playing T-ball, you have to be like, oh my God, this quarterback, what a hero he was. His 24 pass attempts, what a beast. Mahomes can carry a team, 40 pass, whatever the pass attempt number he needs, he can get there. Purdy can't go over 30 in a game like this without screwing up everything. And even if he only throws like 21 passes for 220 yards, they're going to try to find a way to swing it for him if the 49ers win.
That's a good point. We've seen some, not undeserving, but maybe if you were just straight up looking at the game, you wouldn't say that this guy was, like Matthew Stafford a couple years ago played a good game. Of course, like it's not like it was a joke that he got the MVP, but you could have made a pretty good case for Cooper Kupp, that type of thing.
Yeah.
And then, to your point on the defensive side, that reminds me, it was the Buccaneers Super Bowl year in 2002, right? Where was it Dexter Jackson and Dwight Smith?
Probably Dexter Jackson won it because he had like 3 INTs or something.
He had 2, but I think that there was another guy who had another pick 6 late, so he had 2 pick 6s, but the voting was already in.
Yeah, I can't remember. That's quite a list of guys that we could go on remembering there. Anyway, I don't remember that one, but it's safe to say, like the Dexter Jackson example, much like Larry Brown in 1995 with the Cowboys, it's like, even if everybody knows that the player isn't very good on defense, if they make a couple lucky plays that are specifically at a moment where everyone was watching and everyone was, there was a lot riding on the play in question. If it turns out some guy, whatever, Tayshaun Gibson or like Drew Tranquil, whatever, it's like if they make an interception where everybody's watching and everybody's watching thinking like, oh my God, there's so much riding on this play, and a play like that happens, it's understandably difficult for people to get it out of their minds afterward.
No, absolutely. And yeah, 80% of the vote, I think, goes from the media. And then like there's a 20% fan vote influence on there as well. Any sort of takeaways from the losers last weekend? I thought that, that there's been a lot of discussion this week, and I think it's a pretty fair summation on both Baltimore and Detroit, where Detroit went down doing what it did. It was always aggressive this year. It's always been an aggressive team under Dan Campbell, and it ended up backfiring. But no one expected them to be routing the Niners in the first half either. It just eventually the Niners kind of woke back up, whereas the Ravens got away from it, the things that made them good.
I think they both got away from it personally, because you'll notice that the Lions got out to that improbable lead while running the ball, and they got away from running the ball and they lost in 2 seconds. So a lot of people make it sound like, oh, it's more nuanced than that. You just don't understand probabilities and math. Like, man, you want to talk about probabilities and making first downs on 4th down conversions, you have to ask yourself the basic question, like, can we get this yardage, and how are we going to get it? What you might also ask, and I don't think the Lions ask this of themselves, what does the defense want us to do? Because I can guarantee you the 49ers were saying like, God, I hope they throw it with Goff. I hope they go 4 wide. I hope they go shotgun, and I hope they throw it with Goff. I hope there's no play action. I hope there's nothing like that. I hope he just drops back and has to throw it. And granted, Goff got the ball to Reynolds, but that was lucky at all. It was lucky that the ball got to Reynolds in a position where Reynolds could catch it. The 49ers had no answer for the run game. And if you're going to go for it in 4th down for 3 or less yards in a situation where you're running like the Lions were, the 49ers would prefer that you throw it. And then the Lions chose to throw it. So I don't know. It's not like the Lions coaches did anything overall wrong in that game. It was obviously an accomplishment to get them as close. It was an accomplishment to get that lead that they did at all. But Yeah, it was so easily foreseeable. It was like, you know what? They're going to go away from the run game, and the 49ers are going to get lucky somehow, the way Brock Purdy always does, because he's the luckiest quarterback that has ever played in the NFL, and that is not a hyperbole. That's a pretty clear fact at this point. No one has ever been half as lucky as Brock Purdy. That guy can throw it to anywhere on the field, and somehow it just ends up in the 49ers, and then not only does it end up on his team, that guy goes and runs for God knows however many yards after the catch. So whatever. You as the Lions in that case have to remember, like, God is not on your side. He is on Brock Purdy's, or maybe Satan rules the world now and he's on Purdy's side. You have to understand that it's one of those two things, and you can't start getting cute. And they did. So, and also the first field goal, it was like, the first fourth down, they were like at the like a 8-yard line or something. You got to take the points. I don't know. The longer Badgley kick is a bigger question mark, because Badgley's not very good, but Badgley can make a 25-yarder, and they could have used 3 points and they got none. So that was brutal. And of course, yes, the Ravens case was much more egregious yet. I mean, Monken did a better job this year than Greg Roman by quite a bit. He still choked in that game, and he basically buried the Ravens from the first second with his decision to run the offense the way that he did that game. And it's so painful and cringe when a coach does something such an aggressive version of abandoning the run. 1 carry in the first half for Gus Edwards, and it's almost like in this case, God or Satan was trying to say to the Ravens, like, hey, maybe you should give the ball to Gus Edwards again. 15 yards, the 1 carry. You're struggling to move the ball, are you? You get 15 yards the one time you give this guy the ball, the first time, and then you go the rest of the game wondering, like, what went wrong? Why can't we seem to move the ball consistently? And 15 yards was right there. It was easy. And then the second half, the next time they give Gus Edwards the ball, it was when the 49ers, it was when the Chiefs were clearly, which was in contrast to the first half, they were clearly selling out against the run in that play. Whereas the first half, the Ravens were just throwing against light fronts all day, just throwing against light fronts, throwing, no matter how light the fronts were. The second time they decide to run it with Gus Edwards, they wait until there's 9 in the box. Monken blew it. It's infuriating. He's better than Roman, but still probably just average. Roman's just, an incredibly bad coach.
Yeah, I mean, I was there. The way that the defense played on the Ravens side in the early going was frustrating, but again, like, you knew that you weren't going to shut out the Chiefs, right? So
Kelsey touchdown, he was right there. Kelsey wasn't open. It was just Mahomes having a railgun, arm, being able to put it wherever he wants. So, that again, like, they should have known though when that happened. It was like, you have to understand that luck is not on your side in this one. You need to be practical.
Yeah, and they were far from it. The Ravens were probably the best running team in the league this year, despite personnel outside of Lamar Jackson that's average. No real star power. Like, we're Gus Edwards guys, but like, we're not going to tell anyone that he's like a top 10 running back or anything. But use him. I mean, he that's an unpleasant man to tackle.
You need the yards.
30 some odd
gives
pounds.
You the yards. Take the yards. They're right there. Just take them. And they're like, no, we have to think harder than that. No, you don't. You need to take the yards.
And what galls me a little bit further is, I'd been pounding the drum about Monken just being someone who's pragmatic, who's practical, who plays to the strengths of the personnel at his disposal, and just none of that happened. And I think the Ravens over the course of the Lamar era, they seem to, especially the 2019 game when they were the 1 seed and Lamar won MVP, and then this year as well. Like, I thought the first half against the Texans was a disaster. It may not have looked like that on the scoreboard, but they play really tight. And I don't know if that's like a Harbaugh problem or a Lamar problem or what, but bottom line is, that, like, we have a large enough sample now where it doesn't feel like they're really playing their best when they absolutely need to. And that's the difference between them and like the Chiefs.
Yeah. Although in the Chiefs case, it's just Mahomes, like it's not as if Andy Reid has any great, and I know he's been kind of rebranded as like this offensive genius. He's not. He's a really good quarterbacks coach. He's a totally decent offensive coach overall, but the Chiefs won that game, aside from the fact of Monken refusing to take easy yardage on the ground in that game. The reason the Ravens lost is just because Mahomes is a top 3 quarterback all time. And when you're going against a player like him, you don't really have a margin of error, and you can't make stupid, unforced mistakes like not giving the ball to your best runner when the defense can't stop the run. So, yeah, it's frustrating because this was the Ravens team that was best built to compete. It was a combination, them losing is a combination of like the buzzsaw matchup of going against Mahomes and just Monken. I think even though Monken was, he blew it in that game, I think he did a good job in general this year. And I think he still is generally pragmatic, but at the very least, this game was an example of him having poor judgment. Like I don't doubt that he was being pragmatic in his thinking process of like, how do we beat the Chiefs? But he fixated on a false premise. He fixated on an idea that like, oh, we in situations such as X, Y, or whatever, we have to throw the ball. And instead, he did exactly what the Chiefs wanted him to do. The Chiefs did not want Gus Edwards running for 15 yards a carry. And Monken helped them out by saying like, fair enough, I won't do it then. So that's not something you can do against a quarterback like Mahomes. And I do think Lamar is still blameless. I mean, we're not even getting into like the Zay Flowers stuff. As much as Monken blew it, the Ravens might have won if Zay Flowers just held onto the ball at the goal line there. And yeah, so Lamar did a good job. It's just it's a shame and it's irritating because Lamar Jackson critics are the worst people in the world. Like they're all they're scum, and they love this. They love it. They get high on it. When Lamar Jackson has his back stabbed by the rest of the team, they get high on, their eyes turn red, and they're like, "Oh God, this is so cool! I can't wait to go post about how he's a running back or whatever." And it's like that. It just really sucks that Todd Monken threw those people, a bone like that. That's you have to. This is something that I think every team needs to think about more. Is like you need to understand your enemy and really hate them, And I don't think Monken really. I think he was. I think he had his head in the cloud, and he didn't have like he didn't have just like the killer instinct that you need. He was looking at like a very sterile like mathematical equation or something, and it wasn't just remembering like we have to break their teeth. We have to crush their skulls running the ball and then make them resent ever making this trip in the first place. And instead he made it like a game of tag. Brutal.
And like any idiot who pays attention, like could have seen where it's like, well, the Chiefs are really good against the pass and bad against the run.
Yes,
that seems like a bad matchup against a Ravens team.
It would seem that way. It might seem that way.
They did.
But that's why you need the galaxy brain part of the equation, which is like, but what if we did everything stupid because they're not expecting it? Almost
so
worked. Good job.
The target was, or the tunnel was painted on the side of the mountain, and Todd ran right into it.
After painting it there.
So,
yeah.
Oh boy! From the Acme School of Offensive Coordinating, we bring you Todd Monken. All right, that's my pain threshold. I'm still smarting from it, of course, man. but we had to get it out there, and frankly, misery is good content. So, listener, you're welcome. Before we get on to some coaching matters, we got a message from our friends over at Circa. Get ready for the ultimate big game parties at Circa Resort and Casino. Super Sunday is in Las Vegas this year. Watch the big game poolside at Stadium Swim's big game viewing party. That's massive screen, booming game sound, and a view of the pyrotechnic and visual effects throughout the game. Snag the best seat in the sun with day beds, poolside boxes, cabanas, and more. Or touchdown at the world's largest sports book, Circa Sports, for the big game bash. 3 stories of football glory featuring a 78 million pixel screen. Book your seat with a variety of reservation options, including bottle service, open bars, stadium-style food, and more. Don't miss these legendary viewing experiences on February 11th. That's next Sunday, folks, so get on this. The big game parties only at Circa Resort and Casino. Reserve today at circalasvegas.com. Tackle. Oh, we also have a message from our friends at FanDuel, and the message starts with tackle. Tackle millions in prizes all playoffs long in FanDuel fantasy contests. If you're new to fantasy, there's no better time to get in on the action because right now new customers get a 100% deposit match up to $100. It's nice. I mean, you can't go higher than that in terms of percentage. Playing fantasy for huge cash prizes on FanDuel is fun and exciting. Just draft your lineup and watch your team move up the leaderboard. Obviously, there's no game action this weekend, but you can already start kind of formulating your lineup builds for the showdown slate next Sunday. I'm already trying to craft out some ideas, some lineup builds. It's going to be all kind of narrative based because the showdown, you got to see it go one way and just kind of attack it in that direction. So excited to see what we kind of have lined up for our plays when we catch back up next Thursday, Mario. Plus, FanDuel, you can choose from full slate contests featuring multiple games, single game contests like the one on next Sunday, season-long best ball contests, beginner-only contests, which are great for learning the ropes, and more. When you win, you get paid instantly. So kick off football season with a 100% deposit match up to $100. Go to FanDuel.com to start playing for huge cash prizes today. All right, Mario, let's button up the coaching carousel. I believe it has officially stopped spinning as the last two vacancies have been filled over the last 16, 18 hours. Mike Macdonald of Ravens fame and Michigan fame. Love to see what he does without working with a Harbaugh, but he is going out to Seattle. And the Commanders went ahead and hired Dan Quinn earlier in the day on Thursday. Seems like there's I don't know, coaching stuff can be interesting in that it really does. I've used this example a million times to describe a million different things, but it does feel like the Family Guy bit where Peter's in the office going for some sort of sweepstakes, and it's like, oh, you can have this boat or you can have the mystery box, and he's like, oh, the mystery box, you could have a boat. So people get a little bit tired of retreads. So I understand the general malaise from Washington people about hiring a retread like Dan Quinn, and the mystery box on the other side, of course, being Macdonald, who is going to be I believe the youngest head coach in the NFL. Forgive me if I said McDaniel, it's Macdonald. But your thoughts on these ones, starting with Macdonald out in Seattle?
I think Macdonald is interesting. It's tough, I think, to tell what exactly he is, especially as far as projecting head coach versus defensive coordinator. At the very least, I think it's safe to say that Macdonald's a really smart coach, and as much as he's a defensive coach, he seems to be very forward thinking. Like, I don't know how Macdonald could come up with his particular defensive scheme, for instance, unless he also had a pretty advanced thought capacity on offensive scheming, because it seems like so much of the Ravens' success is just kind of, thinking through, again, not just like, what is your idea in the abstract of a good defense? It's not just as simple as that. It's like you have to think about ways that you can thwart offenses. You have to imagine, you have to picture the image of an offense failing, and imagine the fears of the offense you're going against, and try to put their worst fears in motion right in front of them. And Macdonald, I think, has shown the ability to thwart most approaches of contemporary offenses. I think he's pretty unique in the way that he does it too. You can look at a lot of defensive coaches, for instance, Dan Quinn, and point toward a very straightforward school of defensive teaching that they hail from. And in the case of Dan Quinn, it's just he's a cover three merchant. He does what Pete Carroll taught him to do. And in the case of Macdonald, it's like no one taught him to do this. He thought of it all on his own. And so to me, Macdonald is a lot more interesting, much more compelling head coaching hire than Dan Quinn, because Dan Quinn, he might be the boat. He might be, something of a reliable return. I just think if we're going to hire Dan Quinn as a head coach because of things that he's done as a defensive coordinator, specifically in Dallas and Seattle, then we should look in both cases at like how replaceable he might have been. And in Seattle, it's obvious. Like, I mean, Gus Bradley did the same things. So there's nothing interesting about having a good defense as a defensive coordinator on the Seahawks when you have the Legion of Boom. Like, it's just not impressive. And then in the Dallas case, like, well, he has probably the most talented front seven in the league, certainly as far as pass rushing capacity goes. And Micah Parsons could be regarded as, the best defender in the league of a 10-year span that he plays in. So if Quinn is successful in Dallas and Seattle, but not Atlanta as a defensive coach, then it seems to me like he is just a coach who gets like whatever the talent of his team has to offer. And I guess there's something to be said for that. There are certainly some coaches who cause who you only get 75 cents of production for every dollar of talent you have, and Quinn might be better than that, but he's also not going to get you to overachieve. And Macdonald, I think, has shown the potential to not only put together some really memorable defenses, but I don't know. I think Macdonald in a lot of ways might be what people wanted Brandon Staley to be, insofar as like he's a defensive coach, but with like a more full understanding of how the whole world of the game occurs. It's like some guys specialize in their very specific areas, and Macdonald, I really think, much like people assumed with Staley being a former quarterback, they thought like, oh, well, that lends to a more complete insight around the game. And that's generally true. But Macdonald, I think, has shown more of a grasp of that. And even if he doesn't have like the quarterback background, he still has shown that he is more this kind of like forward thinking, constantly adjusting, pragmatic defensive coach who has insight on the offensive side of the ball too. And so I like the hiring for Seattle quite a bit.
You know where McDonald went to college?
Georgia.
He did, and then he was a GA, I guess, for Mark Richt.
Everybody acts all impressed with Georgia.
It's a cool place to go to school.
They got quite a list of accomplishments. It's true, and McDonald does really seem like he could be kind of like, I mean, sure as hell looks more impressive than Monken as far as recent Georgia guys go, coordinator wise.
I will say that. And wow, he was a linebackers coach at Cedar Shoals High School in Georgia. I knew some people that went to Cedar Shoals. I'm gonna have to ask if they actually knew that this guy. I think one or two of them.
John, wasn't there some story about McDonald almost like retired as a coach because he couldn't like he had to go some like tougher route than most of them. Like he didn't have any guy just bringing him in, and he had to like barely latch on last second with the Ravens or something like that.
So yes, he was a coaching intern in 2014. I'm looking, of course, at his infallible Wikipedia page, but yeah, basically he was coaching at a local high school in Athens, and then was able to join on as a grad assistant, and then just kind of gradually moved up the chain in Baltimore as a defensive assistant, then defensive backs coach, and then goes over to Michigan, really kind of takes over that defense, turns that Michigan defense into something serious, and then goes back to Baltimore as a defensive coach. And I think, your summation of McDonald is interesting. And I think, I don't know, I want to drive another point at you where the defensive equivalent of running backs don't matter is linebackers don't matter. Off-ball linebackers don't matter. And McDonald got, obviously,
and defensive tackles.
Oh yeah, those guys.
Because Justin Madubuike, as one of the greatest anti-running back, the founder of a lot of the scholarship of running backs don't matter, famously declared Madubuike a bad draft pick because he's just a run stopper. So pretty 1-to-1 kind of correlation there.
See, right? But he got so much out of the linebacking core, and Roquan is going to do what Roquan does, but I felt like the first 2 years of his career, and I felt like, to be fair, he was young coming into the league, but Patrick Queen looked like a guy that was not a bust necessarily, but certainly not someone that was going to be
he was all treading water at best. Yeah.
See, exactly. And then the last 2 years under McDonald, he's been amazing. I don't think the Ravens are going to re-sign him, going to be very interested to see if he follows Macdonald out there. I don't know what their cap situation looks like and what they've already kind of spent money-wise on their linebacker room, but like him and Jordan Brooks could be pretty nasty. Just thinking out loud.
Yeah, I guess Seattle too has Leonard Williams, which is that's significant because the Seahawks didn't really have a defensive tackle presence like Leonard Williams. Even I feel like that's true to say. Even in as far as their peak went, it was like Jaron Reed was one of the highlights, or something like that. So Leonard Williams is not the same defensive tackle sort as certainly not Michael Pierce. Like I think Leonard Williams can kind of play two gap stuff, but he's more so going to be the analog to Madubuike and could be a bit of a menace there. And if they can get a real two gap guy, maybe they already have one. I'm not that familiar with the Seahawks defensive tackle personnel, but if they can get their Michael Pierce, then Leonard Williams can be their Justin Madubuike. And if you have a cumulative defensive tackle presence like those two, then you do tend to keep your linebackers a little bit cleaner.
Yeah, you absolutely do. And when you have great linebackers like that are freed up, then things start looking pretty good. So in Bobby Wagner, about probably close to aging out. So I'll
he's
keep an eye on that. Yeah, I think so. Let's see. Any other coaching commentary, level of surprise that Belichick and Vrabel have made it through this cycle unhired?
Well, yeah. You can believe that guys like Belichick, Vrabel, whatever, are sort of insufficient or whatever. But this is pretty objectively a case, I think, where we have a distribution of head coaching personnel, that just doesn't really make any sense for the various teams. Namely the teams that have coaches like Dan Quinn and coaches like, I don't know, I know he did an okay job last year, but like Gannon in Arizona, like you really want to tell me that Vrabel and Belichick are less than him? It's just, there's a bunch of coaches in the league who shouldn't be coaches, and it's really annoying to me that even though he got fired in the season, it's like guys like Frank Reich and Dan Quinn are always getting hired, and guys like Ejiro Evero never are. And like, if you're Washington and if you're gonna sign a defensive coordinator, head coach, why not take Ejiro Evero? Like he is more like the Macdonald analog, right? Because like Dan Quinn, just a system coach. He took Pete Carroll's machine, he turned the keys on, and he let it run like it already did before he got there. Pretty much the same thing happens in Dallas insofar as like he didn't build the talent. He didn't build the reason they were strong on the defensive side of the ball. Ejiro Evero in Denver and Carolina has taken defenses that were not good. You recall almost immediately after Ejiro Evero left the Broncos, they give up like 75 points to the Dolphins. The Panthers were able to pretty much shut down the Texans in Carolina with like nobody at all. Brian Burns, and then nobody. J.C. Horn's always out. Jeremy Chinn's not apparently a player. Derek Brown is just a tackle 10 yards downfield merchant. This is a crap defense in Carolina, just as there was a crap defense in Denver before and after Ejiro Evero got there. And Dan Quinn gets a head coaching job, and John Gannon has a head coaching job, and it's clearly it's frustrating. Mike McCarthy has a head coaching job. The NFL is not a meritocracy. Nothing in the world is, but the NFL is rampant with cronyism and like basically corruption. And it's a joke. It's a complete joke that guys like Belichick, Vrabel, Evero are not head coaches, while there's a whole assortment of just complete clowns who are. It's ridiculous.
Yeah, and they're not even the mystery boxes, in a lot of cases.
It's the box that says this sucks. Open this for something that sucks, and teams are like, yes, that one. Give it.
Sign us up. You had me at open this crap box, and I'm in.
What does Evero need to do? This is a rhetorical question. I think at this point the answer is there's nothing he can do, but there should be outrage around it. There should be a lot more, by the way, as far as with respect to the Rooney Rule goes, there should be a lot more outrage about Evero not having a job than Eric Bieniemy ever not having a job. Like
Mm-hmm.
this is so way past the line of acceptable. It's offensive. It's disgusting. It sucks. I hate it.
Well, like it was also like so transparent. Like even like the big national NFL reporters would report on like David Shaw or someone getting
David Shaw.
and then specifically say in the tweet, thus satisfying the Rooney Rule. So it's like, okay, we checked that box. All right, now let's get to the series. It's just like I hate the way they frame that. It is. Yeah. I mean, it was. And like
it's ugly, it's stupid. Oh, also not the first name that should have come to my mind, Brian Callahan. Are you serious, man? The guy who did not even run the Cincinnati offense, that runs entirely on the basis of the talent of its personnel. It's the guy who didn't even run that offense that the Titans fired Vrabel for. That Amy Adams Strunk lady is just she's a menace. She's a weird freak, a fox hunter. She's an avid fox hunter. Do you have any idea what has to be wrong with your brain to want to hunt foxes? Anyway, that's who hired Brian Callahan. That's the person who fired Vrabel with no input from anybody, hired Callahan, and then said, okay, now Rand Carthon, I will promote you to GM. And when my head coaching hire burns out because he's a Nepo case who sucks, I'm going to fire you, Carthon. I'm not going to fire myself as the lady who inherited the team. I'm firing you. I hate this league sometimes, man.
Correct me if I'm wrong as far as like that genre of coach, an offensive coordinator who doesn't actually like do the play calling and all that. Like, is that pretty similar to what Nate Hackett, his hiring in Denver was akin to with LaFleur pretty much running the show offensively?
So, yeah, I mean, obviously I am not impressed with Callahan, but I guess I have to admit there are certain things that were clear about Hackett that I can't accuse Callahan of being. But yeah, it's man, I can't even remember what the case was for. Was it they were trying to trade for Rodgers? That was their whole thing. Like they were yeah, unless if Amy Adams Strunk has some great scheme to trade for Joe Burrow and this is just step one of that, perhaps I will eat crow yet. But yeah, the Hackett hiring, the Callahan hiring up until that point is basically like hiring Nate Hackett without even having the stupid side scheme about just making the hiring in the first place to get a quarterback you never do.
Yeah, and Burrow, he's an Ohio guy. Like he's going to be in Cincinnati for his career. I would have to imagine something would have to go. I mean, you can't put it past Cincinnati's organizational past to screw it up, Carson Palmer. But
it's hard to when there are teams run by people like Amy Adams Strunk, though. It's like Mike Brown might have ruined a lot of years for the Cincinnati Bengals, but the league. The cronyism was always there, but what's more recent, I think, is like this more complicated tangle of political interests, like especially related to analytics, scare quotes, very much scare quotes. But this idea of analytics, which people colloquially throw around as like a synonym for just good math or being very smart or something like that, it leads them to premises like you got to hire an offensive head coach, a coach from a team that throws for lots of yards, even if he had nothing to do with it, even if he's only in that position because he's the son of an NFL coach and college head coach who ran a college program where Zach Taylor was a quarterback and became friends with Callahan, whose dad was around the program. Even those things you lead yourselves to when you subscribe to sort of things that they do nowadays that they didn't in the 90s or whatever. Yeah, it's a total mess. And I really do feel bad for Titans fans because what they've gone through from beginning with the AJ Brown trade to this, and then for it to not get any better, like they got years to go. You're in hell. Yes. You're not getting out anytime soon. And especially not while that lady is at pushing any buttons. Like it's just nightmare.
Yeah, like I think it's probably unlikely that Derrick Henry's back. The jury's
he's going
still
to the
out
Chargers.
That'd be kind of tight.
Yeah.
You've got the jury's still out on Will Levis. Defense...
Harbaugh's probably a good hiring. I guess we can say that at least. Like,
yeah.
I saw some of the running backs don't matter dorks getting mad about that one. I was like, yeah, great timing, guys. Right off of Brandon Staley, your golden boy, blowing it all. You're gonna, at this particular moment, air all your grievances against Jim Harbaugh, who has success, by the way. Like, oh, but he runs though. Yeah, you don't want to win, is what I'm hearing. You would prefer to lose throwing the ball than win running it, and you ridicule the people who don't subscribe to your beliefs. That's smart. And again, it's also smart to time it right now. It's not even have the sense to lay in wait and wait till a more advantageous moment to air it out. It was just like right after Brandon Staley was just like an all-timer dork failure. Like, yeah, let's start talking about how Jim Harbaugh is the one who doesn't know ball. That's going to age well.
Just winning a title at Michigan, 3 years in a row of making the college football playoff, kind of reinventing himself along the way after the nadir of the 2020 season. I mean, I've always been a big Jim Harbaugh fan. I think that he's a lunatic, but
he's
in
insane,
an endearing way.
But he knows how to run a team, and you'd have to be an idiot to question it by now.
He's powered by whole milk, and he's also rightly changed his opinion on eating chicken. So I mean, like
I'm sorry, what was his chicken opinion?
He doesn't eat chicken because it's a nervous bird. But
beta bird only eats eagles and hawks. Yeah.
Have your eagle egg. Give me the eagle powers. Give me the nutrients. Little Nacho Libre.
You don't want to inherit the coward's soul of a chicken by eating it. That's just it's embarrassing when you do that.
But he has since changed his tune. I guess they got chickens at the Harbaugh house up in Ann Arbor.
Brave enough chickens for Jim to sign up.
He's like, look at them. They're productive. They go to work every day. They lay the eggs. You know, I respect that. That's basically the gist of what he was getting into. I love Harbaugh lore, so I'm gonna stop myself before I fill the entire rest of the podcast.
There's a lot to it.
Oh God, yes. All right, let's shift gears a little bit. It is Senior Bowl week, and you and I are both kind of getting into the draft waters now as it goes. But I wanted to kind of focus on the Senior Bowl specifically because it is this week. The Combine happens at the end of this month. I think it'll get started 4 weeks from today. So obviously a ton more to unpack over the next few weeks and few months. So trust me, there will be plenty of draft coverage. But in terms of there being a game this weekend involving these players and obviously a lot of practices with a lot of eyes on these guys, I wanted to kind of get your thoughts here. So how much have you looked at the running back or receiver rooms for the Senior Bowl rosters?
I haven't looked specifically at the Senior Bowl rosters. I kind of am just going to skip the Senior Bowl, I think, this year and just go into the broader, breakdown of the class, like underclassmen included. So I do have some catching up to do about these guys, but part of the reason why I'm behind in the first place is that some of these guys, especially at running back, I just kind of cross off right away. Like, this is just not a very impressive group. And the Senior Bowl group, it's like, I don't even know who granted, a couple of these guys, I legitimately just do not know who they are and need to familiarize myself yet. Like Marshawn, Lloyd, like, I don't know who that guy
I can tell you about Marshawn Lloyd.
Oh, what's his deal?
Well, Marshawn Lloyd, graduate of DeMatha High School in Prince George's County, Maryland. He went to both USCs. So he started his career at South Carolina, I believe tore his ACL before his freshman season, I want to say. Then comes back, but kind of works his way back, but ends up being a good player for the Gamecocks, and then transfers over to the other USC with Cliff Kingsbury this past season. And he was impressive, and his measurables at the Senior Bowl are intriguing at the very least. He's 5'9",
dense as hell,
217.
That's like a Travis Henry frame or something.
See, and we love Travis Henry. So more
tiny
guys
hands
like
though,
that.
John. I got to look up his fumble count to see if there's anything there. Yeah, he looks like he's a bit of a fumbler, which would kind of make sense because he's got the smallest hands I've ever seen.
Yeah,
not on Earth.
Quarters.
Yeah, not on Earth. I'm sure my hands are smaller, but 8 and 3/4 is about as small as you'll see on an NFL running back. So Yeah, he's got a lot of fumbles, and that's probably going to be an issue, especially in the context of his injuries. But yeah, it's like Michael Wiley is one of the like prized running back players in this group. It's like he might be a third down back in the NFL, like his dad was, but he's not going to be more than that. And Michael Wiley, Ohio State, was probably better than Michael Wiley, Arizona. So yeah, these guys just it's a weak looking group. It's for me, the interesting running backs in this class are more like I guess just the guys that aren't in this game, namely Blake Corum and I guess Bucky Irving.
I'll throw one more at you from the Senior Bowl. Unfortunately, it looks like I saw Tom Pelissero reported this morning that Rasheen Ali from Marshall tore his bicep. So that's a good 4 to 6 months, and I think he needed to have a good pre-draft process to like really kind of stamp his draft stock. So
yeah, that really sucks.
But he's an incredibly productive back for Marshall. Had like kind of a weird career arc. He was amazing in 2021. Had barely played for kind of undisclosed reasons in 22, but came back pretty strong this past year, and then. My favorite, I think, from this group is probably Ray Davis, formerly known as Ramon Davis.
Him and Kamani Vidal are also extremely dense. I can't remember the last time there were this many running backs under 5'10" who are pushing 220, and there's 3 of them in this game.
Yeah, Ray Davis among them. So he started his career at Temple, actually, and then
that guy.
Mm-hmm.
Okay,
and then he went to Vandy. And then he leveled up still within his own division and ended this past year at Kentucky, and he ran really well. And
those pass catching numbers are interesting,
right? So he was very efficient with that. Caught 33 out of 40 targets this past year, 8.1 yards per target, and 7 receiving touchdowns on those 33 catches.
Yeah, that's basically dominating as a pass catcher, and you might even have been able to catch a glimpse of it in the prior year with Vanderbilt. I assume their passing game is rather poor, but
correct.
Yeah, so I'm concerned with Davis that he's probably not going to test very well. That he might be a 4.7 guy or something like that, which seems to be a recurring theme also in this class. Like this is not Senior Bowl, I know, but the Notre Dame running back, Esteem or whatever, is like the production really jumped off the page for me, and the build certainly, and I even like the way he plays quite a bit. But it looks like he might run a 4.75 or something like that. He looks pretty slow, and there's a pretty clear lack of speed in this class. Like there's guys who might, and Davis might be one of these guys. There's these guys who might be able to make it in the NFL, particularly because they can pick up the blitz and catch passes. And in Davis's case, it's also true. Like he's got a dense enough frame that you can probably put some work on him, like he can, if you are the kind of team, the kind of GM that just wants to be able to put in a running back and not have to think about it anymore because they'll just pick up the blitz and be, mid otherwise. Like it seems like there's a couple guys in this class, and Davis might be one of them, but it would be reassuring if they could test decently well, which in Davis's case would even like a 4.65 would be kind of enough. I'm just worried that some of these guys are going to run like 4.8s and stuff like that.
Would that put lazily comparing the helmet, but could he have like a level of Chris Rodriguez interest to you?
Well, the difference for me is that Chris Rodriguez ran like hell at Kentucky, and Davis is not an explosive runner production-wise, and he wasn't at those were bad offenses at Vanderbilt and Temple, so it's not necessarily his fault. But Chris Rodriguez was a guy pushing like 6.5 yards a carry, so and with workhorse volumes to boot. So man, you know what? If Chris Rodriguez was in this class, I think he'd be like a top 3 running back for me in this class. That's how bad this one is looking.
It's not great, but there will be some usefulness, I assume.
Somebody will. Yeah, CJ Anderson was useful. It's like there's somebody in the right place, right time can be useful. It's just for like dynasty football purposes, it's really difficult to guess years, or a year anyway in advance. Like who's going to be the really lucky one?
Yeah. Honestly, that's kind of what it's gonna be like. Who gets the shot and everything like that. And then Cody Schrader is like the last one, but his career arc is kind of fascinating. Started at a Division II school that
Oh, that's the Missouri one.
that I've never heard
Okay.
of. He's 5'8", 207. So one of the smaller, dense guys, but he was. I mean, Missouri's offense in general really kind of took off this past year. So I think a rising tide lifts all ships. But even still, 1,600 yards, 14 touchdowns, about 6 yards a carry in the SEC. That was good. It was a very good year. I mean, at least he got himself onto the radar.
Yeah, definitely. And I think he's also in this category where he's not explosive, but certainly took on a lot of workload. And guys like him, for me, if they test well enough and they end up on a team that just values them, giving us reason to think they'll have opportunity, that's usually enough to sign off to some actionable extent. Like I don't particularly think Schrader or any of these guys looks like they'll be Pro Bowl players or anything like that, but if they get the opportunity to get the ball, then they can be useful in fantasy, even if they're average or whatever other word you might use. So Schrader is one of those guys who, if he tests if he let's see, so 5'9", 205 was he's a
It
5'8", 207.
Yep.
So if 5'8", 207, if he runs like a 4.55 or something like that, then as much as that wouldn't make him an obviously standout prospect, it would be just enough, I think, for you to sort of, at the very least, say like this guy can play 30 snaps in a game if a team gives him the chance.
Yeah, I think so. And he definitely checks off the box of having that dog in him because not easy to do what he did. And I want to say he led the SEC in rushing this year.
1,627 yards, 14 touchdowns at 5.9 yards per carry in 13 games. So still not what I would call explosive per touch production, but that's almost like that like Chase Brown kind of category of production where it's like, yes, it's volume driven, but when a guy takes on that much volume successfully, A, that's just impressive in itself, and B, you can do the thing again. It's like a little bit like the analogy of baseball pitchers going into the bullpen or something. It's like maybe Schrader is a 5.9 yards per carry guy in college as a 20 per carry, 20 carry per game kind of running back. But if he had been only getting 10 carries per game, maybe he would have been able to run a little bit hotter, get a couple more big plays. Jalen Warren was another instance of that. Like he was a workhorse at Utah State and Oklahoma State, and looked much less plodding when he got to the NFL, even though he didn't run very well or anything like that. So there is a precedent of guys like this showing up and not so far into their career. I don't mean like in a 5-year timeline. Sometimes they pop up in their first or second year, especially if the guy ahead gets hurt.
Yeah. So bear all those things in mind. So yeah, I mean, and we're not going to vehemently disagree that this is a lackluster running back class, but it's not one that you can completely write off. I think
and there's teams have to fill their depth charts. So it's like even if they don't like them either, it's like they're good. Some of these guys are going to be on teams.
Yep. And therefore we have to pay attention. So why not start now? Looking at the receivers a little bit, I know that you're a bit of a fan of one Jacob Cowing. Would you care to share with the class your takeaways? Who is this guy to you?
Yeah, so he's not a lock or anything. He's definitely not a blue chip prospect. And if you're thinking of a worst case comp, I think someone like Penny Hart might come to mind. But in the case of both Hart and Cowing, you have a guy who is really, really memorably productive, including as a true freshman, both at lower levels of competition. It was Georgia State for Penny Hart, and it was UTEP. Was that right?
UTSA, I want to say.
Okay. So Cowing was at one of those, nothing Texas schools one way or another. And Sorry, it was UTEP. So
Okay,
yes, his true freshman year though, Cowing had he only played 8 games, but he had 75 targets in those 8 games, and was super efficient. Easily led the team in receiving yardage and all that. And it's just point blank the case that not many players draw usage like that. Like you'll see, there's a case like Tommy Schuler at Marshall or something like that, where they draw the same volume, but what those guys didn't draw is the same share of the offense. Like Cowing was just kind of the man when he got there. And so Cowing has always produced usage and efficiency that stand out just immediately. And on the basis of just that detail, I think his prospect profile heavily indicates starting NFL receiver ability. It's not just that true freshman year where he had 691 yards in 8 games. His true sophomore year, he had 1,354 yards in 13 games at 11.8 yards per target. So monstrous efficiency for the kind of volume that we're talking, especially for the age at which he was playing. So with all that said, Cowing did show up. He had 2 more really great years with Arizona, but anyway, he got to the Senior Bowl a fair amount smaller than expected. Like he was listed at 5'11", 175 on the Arizona depth chart, but he showed up to the Senior Bowl and they checked him in at 5'8.5", 165. So he's tiny, and I think as much as this isn't that exciting, his profile at this point is trending along probably like a Josh Downs kind of trajectory. Like Josh Downs was also a really high volume, super high efficiency pass catcher at North Carolina. At the combine, he was like whatever he's like 171 or something at 5'9". So he was also very small. I suppose the person could look at Downs' rookie year and see it as inconclusive. To me, it was a clear success, but we're talking, if only due to the frame, we're talking probably a slot receiver at the next level. I just think Cowing, as long as he tests vaguely decently, his production at UTEP and Arizona both say that like he's probably a starting NFL receiver. And from this point, as far as his testing goes, what we're waiting to see is does he have the speed to threaten vertically, or is he going to have to be like an underneath slot receiver kind of guy? And I don't know which way that's headed. I would like to think he can run fast, but usually the small school guys, UTEP, they usually struggle a little bit in the athletic testing. But I'd love to be wrong, because if Cowing does test above average as an athlete, then to me he would be something like a top 40 pick. But I guess at 5'8", 5'9", 165, he's more so trying to tread water at like the turn of the whatever 3rd and 4th round.
So I think a lot of people will see those measurements, and if they are feeling optimistic about Cowing or so heartened by this player that I'm about to mention's rookie season, then it's like, oh, well, this is a slam dunk that he's just going to do that. But what do you make of the Nathaniel Dell comps or Tank Dell comps?
I mean, as far as trying to identify a favorable comparison goes, that would be the best case. Or him or Downs, whichever. I'm personally not convinced Dell is better than Downs, but Dell is a bit more extreme of a case for the reasons of he started out at Florida A&M and then played at Houston, which, Josh Downs, even though he was a small, tiny, not necessarily fast receiver, he was still a pretty high recruit. He's like Dre Bly's cousin or whatever. So Cowing and Dell are more similar to each other than they are to Downs, insofar as like they both started at about as low as it gets. Like UTEP, man, aside from like Aaron Jones and Jacob Cowing, UTEP has just been in hell for ever, and there's pretty much just bleakness to be seen there. So going from there to Arizona, it's a pretty decent analog for Dell going from A&M to Florida A&M to Houston, and also the comparison lands insofar as they both have unfavorable height, weight testing, and maybe speed too, because Dell ran like a 4.49 at 165.
Yeah, it was nothing special, right?
Yeah, so it's not good for Cowing if he runs a 4.49 at 165, nor was it good for Dell that he did. But Dell has proven to be an anomaly to whatever concerns normally come with that height, weight, speed um, combination. And again, sometimes the production lends you an insight, especially toward functional athleticism that might not show up in athletic testing specifically. And by functional athleticism, I mean the difference between, running in a straight line, which is the 40-yard dash, and running something more like catching a bubble screen and having to jump over a tackler and anchor your feet and cut and change directions and accelerate. Like, there's no test for that at the combine, but it's a situation that happens plenty enough. And with numbers like Cowing's, much like Dell's production at Houston and even Florida A&M, you had reason to look at the numbers like those. Those uncommonly big volume, big efficiency numbers, and theorize, maybe suspect like maybe he's athletically dynamic in some way that simply doesn't show up in NFL combine testing specifically. And if he didn't have this trait, it's otherwise really difficult to explain his production. So yeah, we especially because Cowing did it in two different places, and especially the UTEP example, there was nothing favorable about that. Like, that's, no one produces for UTEP. It's even it was like, what was it, Jordan Leslie or something was their best receiver of the past like 25 years or something. It's something brutal like that.
There's a pull.
Yeah, it's like no one goes to UTEP and does well except Jacob Cowing. So maybe there's something unique about him.
Love it. Love the breakdown on him. I didn't even know that Dell started at Florida A&M. I just kind of, in my mind's eye, always thought
he transferred after 1 year, and he only played like 4 games. He had something like 280 yards in 4 games, and then transferred after getting hurt, I think.
Okay. Let's move on. A couple other Senior Bowl receivers to touch on. Of this group, who would you like to talk about? We got my guy Lad McConkey, Ricky Pearsall, Roman Wilson, and Johnny Wilson.
Johnny Wilson I have to look at more, but I gotta say the quick glance at his dimensions kind of creeps me out. At the very least, he doesn't really look like anybody else that we've seen. I guess.
No, I looked it up this morning. Like that, they're like, as far as receivers go in our combine database, like no one has his measurements basically. And then that if you scaled it to tight end, which I think a lot of people are kind of expecting him to have to make that change to
Hakeem Butler.
Oh boy, like Colin Johnson or Cole Turner are basically like the other like physical analogs.
Yeah, so there's also what was it? There's that Colorado State receiver who he ran really slow. I guess at least Wilson isn't expected to run slowly, but being 6'6", 235 or whatever, and his numbers are just kind of wonky looking to me. I don't think he's anything. I'd like to be wrong, and if Johnny Wilson runs and jumps really well, that would put my initial take in a more difficult spot. But these numbers just don't do it for me, and he played 2 years at Arizona State, couldn't get on the field or do anything useful, even though there was nobody of note playing there. It's like it's like he was struggling to earn playing time over what would it have been, like Elijah Badger or something like that. Like,
there were Arizona State, which is down so bad, had Jaden Daniels, Ricky Pearsall, and Johnny Wilson all on the team, and still
those first two especially, it's like, what are you guys doing? But yeah,
Herm really fumbled the bag, as it were.
Seriously. So yeah, Johnny Wilson does not look like an NFL receiver to me, but Pearsall and McConkey both do. I don't have a good enough read on them, especially McConkey, to know whether they'll be more than like slot types, but they might be able to play outside. It just probably wouldn't be with much of like a downfield game. They'd maybe be more like Sean McVay outside receivers than they would be Philadelphia outside receivers. Like sometimes to be an outside receiver in some offenses, you need to have real vertical and sideline ability. And I think you could say McConkey and Pearsall are both more like not finesses and like soft, but more about like precision or something, more about like exploiting the space that they are given by the coverage, and less. The AJ Brown thing is a sharp contrast because he'll just bulldoze whatever's in front of him and just power downfield no matter what. And these guys aren't that, but it's fine. Like their production in both cases says that Pearsall and McConkey, I think they could probably both play outside as long as they weren't expected to be like the vertical threat. But at the very least, they should be able to draw targets rapidly at like the intermediate and underneath. And in a 3-wide league, there's clearly a number of teams that could use either of them.
Yeah, Ladd to me has really sure hands. I think he's actually like legitimately like pretty fast. It wouldn't surprise me if he runs in the 4.4s or low 4.4s even.
That'd be really, really good. If he runs in the low 4.4s, I could even see almost like a first round case for McConkey.
Yeah, I mean he was righteous at Georgia, but I'm concerned with his final season dealt with some back and some knee stuff. So I hope that I think by virtue of him participating in practice this week and doing well, I think that's a pretty good sign that stuff is behind him, of course. But
he might be a slot only guy. I'm just noticing he has very short arms and small hands. So generally, so for instance, Khalil Shakir fell to the 5th round because he had really short arms, even though he torched everybody at Boise State and ran a 4.43. So that's kind of like the nightmare scenario McConkey might be looking at. But I would hope the league looked at the Shakir case and realized like, oh, I guess we should care a little bit more about how they actually play and less about just how we're vibing with their wingspan or whatever.
Yeah, arm aesthetics. But I'm a believer in Ladd, and I think it's amazing that we're having this conversation because he was almost like more meme than player when he committed to Georgia. It's like
it's pretty
Ladd
amazing
McConkey?
Name.
What? Like so grew up a Tennessee fan also. Sorry, Vols. Let's see. And you unpacked Pearsall a little bit. Definitely intrigued by it. He has some like crazy highlight catches from this past year at Florida specifically that
he
sort
looks
of make you stop.
Good.
Yeah. So I think he apparently has been cooking this week. So I'm interested to unpack that a little bit further, look into that a little bit further.
John, can I ask you,
yes.
What is Brendan Rice's deal? I haven't had a chance to look at him yet.
His dad's famous.
Oh, that's okay. I did not realize that was the association there. So, is there hype with that then? I'm late on this one.
It's hard to figure out basically any of these USC receivers this year because they spread the ball out so much. Like I don't know if anyone had more than like a 15% target share. You know what I mean? So like there's no clear way to say like, oh, this guy dominated or this guy didn't. Like you could even point to like Taj Washington on SC from this past year. And you don't really know like who the best one of that group was. Dorian Singer was supposed to be a big deal. He came over from Arizona, didn't do a ton. It was, it made USC basically impossible for college football DFS. But, Brendan Rice definitely, he exceeded my expectations this past year. I do wonder a little bit because he never had more than 4 touchdowns in his previous 3 seasons, him elevating to 12, how much of that is due to playing with Caleb Williams, 1, and then 2, just being a bit older, having that age advantage that we talk about a lot in grading these prospects. But I mean, 11.5 yards per target, that's obviously impressive. He definitely has like the physical stature.
He had a couple big games as a sophomore against Oregon and Arizona, so that's always good to see. Like even if a guy doesn't get volume going as an underclassman, sometimes you'll see a game, be it because of a starter missing that game or just whatever circumstance. And when they can answer like that was actually another thing Josh Downs did. Like he did nothing his true freshman year except like the bowl game or whatever against A&M, and then he went off and it's good to see, Rice having games like that, even when he was otherwise kind of not prominent in the offense.
That game was also kind of what clued me in about Devin Achane on the other side.
Oh, really?
Because I think Trevion Williams was sitting out that game to get ready for the draft, and A&M just unleashes this Achane kid, and the rest is history, obviously. So that was a great Orange Bowl, I think, on it. But in Downs' case, like UNC had NFL ready receivers, De'Ami Brown and Daz Newsome, a handful of other guys, I think. So it was going to be tougher. And then, in Rice's case too, like Colorado was awful. Maybe not rock bottom, but 2020 and 2021, when he was there, that it's not like he was working with great, passing game or scheming around him.
Yeah, definitely. So yeah, I gotta at the very least look more at Rice. But would you say the otherwise biggest names are probably like Malachi Corley, Luke McCaffrey, Jamari, Thrash?
Yeah, Thrash is interesting. I know that you've looked at him a little bit.
Yeah.
Guy from Georgia State who,
not related to James. I thought it was a lock.
Did some digging there. Unfortunate. I guess his dad's just kind of a normal guy. So yeah, still waiting on the James Thrash lineage to continue. But Jamari, he was amazing this past year. I know that with Louisville, you got to kind of view it through the same lens that you would have like the Purdue offenses from the last couple of years, because Braum went to Louisville this past year, so he, the production can be a little bit juiced up, but at the same time, this is a guy that comes from Georgia State and then becomes one of the best receivers in the ACC for a Louisville team that was really impressive this year, made it all the way, I believe, to the ACC championship game. So, that all good things. I think I'm kind of landing where you are, where the testing is going to kind of determine things. He's a little bit older, being a senior and everything, but the fact, anytime, similar to what you're saying about Cowing, like a guy that can move up from the lower levels to a Power 5 and not just produce, but be the best on his team. I think that usually tends to be a pretty significant mark in someone's favor.
Yeah, and Thrash is one of those guys who, in terms of the age adjustment to the production, he's kind of right on the line of what, not like a red flag line, but more like the line between unambiguously good and whatever is immediately less than that. So Thrash, if he runs well, he can take his profile very quickly from sort of a present question mark, in my opinion, to one where it's relatively low concern.
I can see it. And then the last one that I would mention from this group, I'm intrigued by Roman Wilson because he apparently has been having a really good week, and the production is never really going to wow you. And that's why tangentially I am.
Oh, he's the one that was running right past Witherspoon.
So right? I'm not ready to write off JJ McCarthy as much as that might make some people cringe, because the Michigan offense it's just hard to know about the pass catchers, right? Because they were so run heavy, that anecdotally they ran it 30 times in the second half against Penn State, didn't throw the ball once. So, it's a weird offense that we're talking about, but Roman Wilson was always a dog. I think that he's definitely one of the tougher receivers in this class, goes up and gets it. This year, 48 catches on 62 targets, 789 yards, and 12 touchdowns. Michigan.
Because he looked, if that's the Michigan receiver I'm thinking of, whoever it was running right past Witherspoon against Illinois, and a profile like this. So Wilson, I would call his production ambiguous, but not negative. And if he's like a track speed kind of guy, then he could make a surprising amount of noise in the draft order.
He only had one catch against Illinois, Witherspoon's last year, so I'm not sure.
Right, they didn't have success throwing the ball. It was like he was running past Witherspoon, and the quarterback was just, I guess it would have been McCarthy, was just kind of not doing anything helpful or something.
Yeah, that was a bad game for Michigan. I think Corum got hurt in that game, and that kind of changed everything for them. Yeah, I still got it. Still got my fastball for the college football anecdotes. Can still remember that kind of stuff. But Wilson definitely like he I don't think he has any one wow trait, but I could be wrong if you're right on the speed element. But
I did not know either way. I was I didn't know if his if it was the guy that was losing Witherspoon. I assume speed is the main weakness of Witherspoon's. So yeah, if Wilson can come out and run like a 4.4 or better, that would I think take him from the round like 3-4 turn fringe kind of range and more solidly in day 2 maybe.
I'd like to see that. I'm a fan of his. And then tight ends, there doesn't seem to be a ton present at the Senior Bowl. I I have some like lingering optimism maybe for AJ Barner, but maybe he's just a blocker. But he did catch a lot of passes when he was at Indiana before just kind of being a blocker at Michigan. And then Jaheim Bell, just kind of an interesting athlete. I think he's one of those guys that could test extremely well, but he's 6'2", 244.
He needs
I don't know what you do with him.
Yeah, he needs to test really well. Did you get a chance to watch this the giant one from Minnesota at all?
Brevin Spanford.
Yeah.
Not really, other than just remarking like, wow, that's a really big guy.
61 targets is a pretty big target count for someone that enormous. But if he's running a 5.1 or something, it's a big who care.
Yeah, Minnesota these last couple of years have been it's been pretty hard to watch. Like it's basically going to have to be something where I'm out somewhere and the Minnesota game is on for some reason. I very seldom, if any time, went ahead and watched any Minnesota. But I think that marks a pretty good stopping point for today. We'll get some reactions next week if anyone else stands out from the Senior Bowl. And then, of course, we're going to do a big old deep dive into the Super Bowl as well. So that's going to wrap it up for us here on the RotoWire Fantasy Football Podcast. Big thanks to our sponsors over at Circa and over at FanDuel for Mario Puig. I'm John McKechnie. Thanks for listening. Oh, and if you'd like to get behind our paywall, go ahead, check out our free trial, rotowire.com/.